Hey everyone, Yui here back with another commentary, this time for Bud Bedeker's 1959 movie, Ride Lonesome. Just me this time, but you can watch this as its own standalone podcast, or you can press play along with me and join me in hearing my thoughts as we go along. I'm going to do a countdown if you would like to do that. Three, two, one, go. Uh, love the Columbia logo. Yeah, is that and what is it, the TriStar logo that is most burned into my memory from childhood with the horse kind of galloping. I don't know when those newer ones were instituted, but I know they're both kind of part of the Sony empire or whatever. But I remember seeing them all the time on 90s VHS tapes. Now, I think this and Comanche Station are the only ones of this renown cycle to be photographed in CinemaScope, like it says on the screen. Yeah, with Eastman color. Hell yeah. Yeah, I like all these movies. I don't. I mean, there's kind of like this tendency, I think, where people just watch the CinemaScope ones, which is fine. But I don't, I don't really have like an overriding dislike for the ones that aren't in scope. Uh, I mean, they're all equally as photographed. Although one has to admit that, especially with 50 CinemaScope movies, there are certain things that are afforded to you that you just simply can't get elsewhere. I mean, you're not gonna fucking watch a goddamn VistaVision movie the way you're gonna watch this. Now we got Randolph Scott finally coming into view. Just put away his horse. Oh no, I don't want this to be one of those commentaries where I just describe things that are happening. Uh, but I love this here where you just get a simple camera movement and like a dissension and then a pan over to Randolph Scott's quarry. What's his character's name in this? Ben Brigade. Yes, good, pretty good fucking name, I would say. Solid Western name. Like my brother's name Ben. If my last name was Brigade, I don't know. Something I admire about writers is that they always seem to come up with the the coolest names or the most forgettable. But in this instance, we got the coolest. Yeah, but the way things are framed here, you look at this. I mean, with the his gun in the foreground, the other character in the background, you always have this exploration of the z-axis in Bud Bodeker's West. It's not just a character against a landscape, but it's characters in relation to each other, then framed by the landscape. And it's not hard to see that Leone would take a lot of influence from them. Although I've never really heard him talk about these movies, but I mean, you just see it in the images. I think if he didn't get it from here, he got it from something like Joseph H. Lewis's Terror in a Texas Town, or he just came up with it by himself, which is totally legitimate and fine. But it's so much cooler if we ascribe some meaningful influence or legacy to the way things go forward. It makes us feel like there's progression, or at the very least, repetition. But yeah, right here we see that he's kind of outnumbered. I don't know exactly the name of this place in California where they shot this, but there's a lot of westerns that are like located in this like very like these circular craggy rocks. Looks very volcanic. Um, I got into like I watched Conan the Barbarian as a kid way before I ever saw a western, and so I always associate this landscape with the ancient primeval world of Hyperborea instead of the West. But obviously, it's more real than a fantasy world. Yeah, so you have these confrontations, these huge things that are reduced to shot over shot, but it's not close-ups, which I appreciate. I mean, I don't know, like, I always talk about this, but the dependence that especially modern cinema has on close-ups for everything, when something like CinemaScope was designed specifically so you could see these huge landscapes and all this stuff that they would put on screen, and these movies, especially because they're so minimalist, you actually do end up with this, like, stark, you have these vistas, but then there's not that much in them, right? You have, like, maybe 4 or 5 people at most in the frame, and so you're not overwhelmed with visual detail, and your eyes are brought into a space of absence, and whatever presence is there is that much more highlighted. But yeah, like here, like we haven't had a close up yet. All we have is these two shots, mediums. Um, and see here, like the way that when he pans with the scope, you get this curvature on the edge of the frame. A lot of Hong Kong movies have this same thing where uh, I know that's because they're using these like very extreme zoom lenses because they want to pop in and out of the action. But here you get the similar effect, and it's a little bit kind of weird for the modern eye because you're used to movies not having those, I suppose, quote unquote technical flaws. But I think they give the movie character. I actually quite like them. Yeah, he just caught all of his buddies. But see, that's what I like is that you have this presence of the unseen, right? All the bad guys are in the rocks, and you don't exactly understand where they are, and yet our hero is, able to use the situation that's at hand, namely him and his quarry, right? He's able to use that microcosm to manipulate the macrocosm that's around him that could prove deadly. And see, now we just have this simple return to the same camera movement that we had before, where we go down the valley. And that economical use of space, like he doesn't, like nothing is wasted in a movie like this. I mean, it's barely feature length, uh, and there's often these symmetrical repetitions of movements from earlier. In that way, it's kind of operatic in the way that there'll be musical motifs, but here there's, obviously visual motifs. But because it's so short, you end up noticing them that much more. And all these renowned westerns do have elements that are repeated. Like in most of these movies, there's a scene where you have a wagon going through the water as people are traveling. I mean, so much of these movies are traveling and navigating this environment uh, more than most westerns, really, because there are westerns about wagon trains and stagecoach. There's stuff like that, but here it's everything's so depopulated. In a way, it's kind of like a John Sturges movie where you have this obsessive orientation. Although Boddicker is much less fussy about that. I mean, in Sturges, you get the feeling that he's like arranging a chessboard with all his characters. You have to be here and you have to be there. Here, there's much more of a free mobile camera. Things aren't like geometrically framed or positioned, and he's cutting a lot less than he needs to. Like here, instead of just cutting to them arriving at this little ranch area, he just pushes the camera in, and that's all you really need to do to create interest. Like he's just moving within the frame like Murnau does, and when you do that, you know, sure it takes a little bit of thought as to how you're going to move the camera, but it saves you time because you don't have to, cut to a reaction shot or you don't have to cut on action. You could just stage things out, and it leaves you feeling a little bit more relaxed in a lot of ways. But cutting is not that incremental to how the film is affecting you. And here we got Pernell Roberts, who very much feels kind of like a John Carpenter character with his swaggering masculinity and relaxed attitude. He reminds me a lot of Napoleon Wilson from Assault on Precinct 13. And so he'll cut to these other characters coming into frame, so we know that they're there. So we feel their presence even if they're not on screen. And see that line, like as small as I thought you'd be. It does recall the what is it from Escape from LA? I thought you'd be taller. Now, obviously, Robert's character is here to, help free the captive that Scott has just acquired. But there's this interplay where everyone's polite to each other, and there's a way to go about things. And there's always this tension of, are these smiles going to drop and are the guns going to come out? And in most of these, that's what ends up happening. But later we'll see uh, the filmmakers have a couple of tricks up their sleeve, and they don't want to necessarily do what they did before. Even though these movies are about repetition, they are also about playing within the space of cliche, even their own cliche. Oh yeah, those awesome Burt Kennedy lines. A man's got a reason to ride this country. You got a reason? Lord help me. I don't. I tried to ride a horse once, and it was very scary. I will admit. I did not like it. Although they're beautiful animals, of course, but I am too much of a babby. Yeah, we have a young James Coburn here who doesn't really have a lot of lines in the movie, and man, he looks so fucking skinny. Like he's, I kind of like. It's so interesting when you see actors before they've really established their huge presence because, yeah, he just does not look like the James Coburn who will later be a movie star in the '60s and '70s. But here he is, and in fact, a lot of people who are better known in other movies, especially like later westerns, show up in these Bud Bedecker movies, especially Lee Marvin and Ride Lonesome, and then later we'll have Lee Van Cleef here, who is kind of he's playing a Lee Van Cleef esque character, but way less mean. None of the sadistic stuff in a Leone movie he has. Yeah, that wide shot earlier, where we just see the dust cloud instead of the actual movement of the Native Americans, you know, the power of suggestion is palpably felt in these movies just because they're so low budget. I think it's a great combo, right? Like you don't actually have that much money to show a lot with these, but you don't really need it, do you? Uh, you just, you know, work with what you have and then just let the landscape do a lot of the heavy lifting, right? I mean, like the beauty of the clouds and the earth, you know, you don't really need to spend money on that. And I think it's a lesson that a lot of modern films uh, could take is, if you just spend the time on composition and interesting juxtapositions and, and also, of course, just like character and good writing, you don't actually have to have that much quote unquote spectacle. and I think people would still be interested in watch it. Although, given today, they'd probably be like, "Oh, I only want to watch it because it's a free on Netflix or something," um, which is unfortunate. Yeah, see, you have like the dust cloud, the smoke in the mountains. There's this idea that in Bud Bedickers' universe, the natives are always coming on the horizon, and then they arrive, and they're almost like these like silent, non-linguistic characters. It's like the natives exist in a silent movie, and the rest of the characters exist in a sound movie, um, which is a little problematic, maybe. I don't know. I mean, this is the bargain. This is the Faustian pact that you make with westerns, where you get all the iconography, you get all the pleasures of them, right? But you also have I don't know, the cultural preoccupations and sins of that genre too, which some movies are better at than others. And so I say you just have to take it on an individual basis. With these, uh, but Bedeker's, it's almost like he's not really taking um, the Native American people as like. Hmm. How do I justify this? It's like he regards them as like abstractions, which is maybe worse than just portraying them as like bloodthirsty animals or whatever, which is obviously not good. But I think you can understand his use of technique, even if we think maybe nowadays we wouldn't make the same choices. Yeah, with the way Brigade acts in this scene, I really love that his characters. I mean, his characters get darker as the saga goes on, and by the time of this at Comanche Station, he seems like a pretty suspect, like bounty killer, kind of weird. I don't know. He's got his own code of honor, which I respect, but it's he's very brisk, and in a way, like almost like a prototype Eastwood character, anti-hero. Um, we don't exactly dislike him, but he's very pragmatic, and he's pragmatic in search of an ideal across this landscape. But he's not necessarily, he's not easy to fool. He's not interested in peddling illusions or niceties. Now here you get this sequence where it's obviously shot day for night, but because it's so dark and because you can't make out the characters' faces that well because it's played out in these two shots. You're Again, there's more abstraction. It's more stark. And he's just panning the camera around, right? Like it's not. He doesn't have to do that much. I think that use of storytelling economy is very important because he only cuts when he has to emphasize stuff. Otherwise, he just plays it out as as he needs to, and I think that's all you have to do. Like what? I don't know. Obviously, the question of style is, it's the director wants to personally express themselves. You want to get the most out of effect that you can, but I would say there's something to be said for minimalism that is lost on a lot of directors working, especially in Hollywood, where there's this idea that more is more, more cutting, more montage, more everything. And, that's like kind of the American maxim where you get, extra large cheeseburger, fucking large fry, you want your whole fucking banquet. But with art, restraint goes a long way. And I don't, I would never really want to lose that, right? Because it's kind of stupid to compare these movies to something like Bresson, but I think they do have a similar uh, restraint of approach and of philosophy, and they really boil the Western down to its most elemental faculties. And you could say like, well, is it the most deep about this or that topic? I mean, they're really kind of self-contained, hermetically sealed worlds. Um, so you're kept within like a generic space, right? Like this is a Western that is kind of cognizant of Western tropes and elements, and it just assembles them like Lego bricks in different ways. But what I will say is that it does those very skillfully. And maybe that's where the Leone piece comes from, right? Because he uses those for political ends, for comments on society and on quote unquote deconstructing the Western. But he's also just playing with tropes, right? Tropes that are freely used in movies like this. So ultimately, I think like the high-minded expression of a director who wants to say this or wants to say that, we often overlay the context onto the movie and say, well, that's it, right? um, but the film itself, I think, functions on its own, even if we don't have this explicit rally around and say, look, this is what we're supposed to think. I think you can get a lot out of these movies, especially because they're all interrelated. So you can just pop one in and be like, wow, I get the whole thing, because it's they all reflect each other. They're all like little pieces of the same stained glass window. Now this is great because he rides out to meet them, right? So we don't have this. And Randolph Scott has been working in the movies for so long that he does carry that sort of liminal authority. Yeah, because I think a lesser director would have the native character ride up and say, "This is what I want," and I'm talking in a stereotypical voice, and that kind of shit. Whereas here, he just throws down the spear, and you totally understand what the intentions are. And then we have Randolph Scott, who then communicates them more explicitly to us, but he does that in character, right? It's not him talking to the audience; it's him talking to the other people in the scene. Yeah, like a Carpenter movie, we have this almost like this like concentric circle of what's going on, right? You have Randolph Scott, the hero, in the center, and then you have his posse around him, and then around him are kind of like these native warriors who are just mobile and kind of melding into the landscape. And then you have the harshness of the environment, which is another circle around all that, right? And so a lot of the film is pushing in and out of these different layers and focusing on them in particular moments. And everything is organized in that very neat way. So you're not really ever lost as to, who's who or who knows who, or, even if you don't remember the names, you understand everyone's position in regards to the overall scenario. And uh, I really appreciate that. There's so many movies that I watch, and frankly, I just don't understand the plots or the stories to them at all until like the second or third watch. Whereas these, you really do get what's going on because even though it is kind of like a quasi mystery of who's allied with who or who has what intentions, you also still know at the end of the day like where people stand in relation to each other because they express it through action and not necessarily words. Yeah, the status of female characters in these movies, it's questionable. I mean, they on one hand, like she is, like Karen Still's character is sort of infantilized, um, but she does have her reasons. The movie doesn't totally speak down to her perspective, um, but this isn't like Johnny Guitar. There are directors like Nicholas Ray or Raoul Walsh who are much more adept at uh, allowing like a feminine perspective to intrude onto this generic space. Um, and Butterker doesn't really have that. His movies tend to be pretty macho as far as that goes. See, this is great because you see the mescaleros in the background and like we're aware of them, but it's very simple. We're not, it's not overstated. It's just left to be what it is. And the characters notice it, right? I mean, it just feels very naturalistic. I do that simple juxtaposition of figures on a horizon. It totally works. I always find the Western interesting. I think movies at the outlaw Josie Wales or Jeremiah Johnson show this the best, where you do have this huge juxtaposition of different biomes, right? Because they're westerns where they're mostly in the desert. There's westerns that take place kind of like sagebrush. There's westerns that take place in forests and trees. And there's obviously like snowy westerns, right? Kind of like your Hateful Eight, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. You're up in the mountains, and uh, yeah, these Bud Bedecker ones tend to be very dry, very sandy, Lawrence of Arabia type locales. But um, because of their journey, you do see these other bits, right? Like you see these glades and swamps that they traveled through. Yeah, and here is kind of like the Leone version of the West, where everything is a fucking, a desert wasteland, and I don't know, you're just like dotted with abandoned ranches and ruins. Everything seems to be kind of in a semi state of decay. Yeah, it's always the interesting thing about how directors position the West. Is it new? Is it this unvarnished virgin territory where things are being built up for the first time, or is it like, kind of like a gothic locale with, sorry, with like decay and do these places have a history, and what is that history? Because I think John Ford movies very much do have this idea of the West as a place where history happens. And then you have other ones where it's more or less like just the stark landscape where humans move about, and you don't really have a semblance of that like actual people lived in America before fucking white civilization came along or whatever the hell. Speaking of white civilization, man, love killing natives. They just love doing it. Obviously, it's hard to watch these kind of scenes without drawing the necessary uh, political conclusions from them. But I mean, God, like these conflicts did happen, and obviously not as like rousing here. Um, what I will say is, we can just like the intentions and perhaps the ease at which such scenes take place. But Bedecker is quite adept at staging action. His movies aren't full of what we would call action scenes nowadays. But when there are gunfights, it's quite spectacular. I feel, and this whole bit here reminds me of the John Sturges movie "Escape from Fort Bravo," where all the people are kind of huddled down in a little, in like a not a ravine, but just kind of like a lowered center in the ground, and then you have like the natives coming in and attacking, and so there's and like I said before, in that scene, they're all rotating around the locale in a circle, right? So you literally have this idea that, you know, if you have like circling the wagons, well, the people are the wagons in this sense. And so it's a west of individuals and there's a collective, there's various forms of collectives, right? As we see later, we have also the collective of Lee Van Cleef's outlaw gang, right? And so that's like another layer to the circle. Yeah, obviously you just get this optical effect with any camera, as long as you are not fucking up too much. But like the atmospheric layer of where like the landscape begins to kind of blue out and fade in the distance is put to great use here, because when the camera's high up enough, you do see the mountains just become these more less detailed spaces that it recalls like maybe like a Miyazaki movie where you have these, I don't know, like the further you recede in the distance, the more abstract things get, um, and then that again plays into the circle idea. And see here we have another day for night thing, which is, I mean, it looks absurd, right? Because because the shadows are so stark and they're in the middle of the desert, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I've never been in a desert like this, but I don't think the moon is that bright, But then again, who cares? We're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy ourselves. And this is the way you had to do it back in the day. It was hard to film darkness. Not a lot of people did it well. You had to overlay a ton of stuff. Maybe that's why they made so many westerns, is because it's such a reflective canvas, right? The sand reflects the sun, and so you don't actually have to do that much lighting. Or if you do, you really just have to focus on the characters. You don't have to light the background too much. So perhaps you can get a lot of shooting done. There's an ease to it. Then again, I suppose you have to deal with all the fucking goddamn scorpions and rattlesnakes and God knows what else that comes with shooting out in the desert. Yeah, see here we have so many of these scenes of drama and intrigue played out in two shots between two characters. But the camera actually doesn't do that much. We just get these pretty long takes as far as movies go, especially Hollywood movies. Usually, of this era, you don't usually get takes this long, which I love. Again, my thing is don't cut unless you have to. And yeah, you're just able to display the relationship between two people by just orienting them in the same frame. And again, like we have mediums here, and man, like yeah, like there's maybe like one or two close-ups in this movie, maybe if at that. I don't know if there are any. Like it's just crazy. But you love to see it, or at least I do. I know there's this whole school of thought, which is oh my god, the human face is it's the most beautiful, expressive thing that you could possibly photograph. I get that, but I also do believe in a harmony between man and nature. And I think the closer a movie can express that, and we are just focused on the monolithic idea of the face. I mean, it upsets me so much though. Like I really do just get out of sorts because even when directors I like do it, it's like I love The Insider. That's a great movie, but it's like does it really have to all be in fucking close-ups? I don't know. You kind of wish that there was a little bit more restraint. Although I don't know, like Michael Mann worked for a long time in TV. Perhaps that's a tendency that it gets from there, where you kind of have to do close-ups in order to show anything at all. Because when you're watching a fucking television, you're paying attention to the landscape, really. I just think it's a tendency that's also it's filtered into cinema as a whole because now you have all these TV directors, mostly making movies, and so they're like, oh yeah, I'll shoot in CinemaScope with a 235 frame, and all of like the frame is just going to be basically an out of focus just blur of a background, just like a gray blur, and then like a face in the center, and we have like this 3/4 profile shot, and shot reverse shot, and it quickly becomes this like exhausting language that I find very droll, which movies like this don't have at all, which is what I find very special about them. Yeah, I feel like the tendency only really began to emerge in the 70s. I mean, you had like the whole shot reverse shot paradigm since Griffith, but the whole idea of like everything just being faces, yeah, I don't know. There's like some John Cassavetes movies where it is just face on face and there's just nothing between them. And oh my God. Like, respect to him. He's great. He's cool. And I do like Woman Under the Influence, but I don't know. It's not the kind of style that moves me, Doesn't really get my motor running. Yeah, here you have this very stoic expression. You know, he was a good man. Yep, he'd have to be, right? There's just like a total economy of language that's being used. And characters just say exactly what they mean when they mean it and how they mean it. And there's not a whole lot of writerly fussy shit. Yep, Burt Kennedy actually directed a bunch of westerns. I haven't seen any of them. Maybe they're good. I don't know. He's a fantastic writer. I don't know if he wrote any books or any western novels. I would love to check them out because he's quite skilled. Yeah, see the Randall Scott character Ben Brigade. He still has this form of like western chivalry. You know, like he's not totally a cynical character. He's hard bitten, but he's not an anti-hero, I would say. Uh, oh, which of the movies is he though? He isn't one of them. I think it's either Buchanan Rides Alone or Decision at Sundown. I forget. Let me look. I think it's Decision at Sundown where he actually is playing like a more ruthless character out for revenge, which is fairly untypical for him as far as movies go. Usually he's playing like much more of like a smiling, all American cowboy type of guy. I do like in these movies how old he is. He wears his age well. I think there's some actors, right? They tend to get better as they get older. Not just in terms of they're such a better actor. Like they perform better on screen, right? Like Clint Eastwood, my guy, hashtag my guy. Uh, he really gained a poignancy as he aged. I think so many of his films utilize his aging well, even if the text of the movie doesn't necessarily acknowledge it. But just him being old has this presence that is hard to beat. I think when you have that experience on your face, you don't have to do that much to sell the audience on an emotion or an idea. Yeah, I'm so used to James Coburn having fucking gray hair. He's one of these guys like Lee Marvin who just went gray really early in their life. Uh, yeah, it's weird to see him so young and just kind of wearing jeans, hanging out. He kind of, not saying he looks like James Dean, but there is like something of that quality to him, I guess. Yeah, we have this idea of, you need a reason to ride this country. This woman's got a need. There's this idea of searching for purpose and clarity of purpose, right? That you need to like be aware of what your mission is. And only Randolph Scott in this movie seems to be fully cognizant of his mission and of the faculties that are going into that. And it gives these movies a an existential feeling where the world is hostile and implacable, and you're trying to define yourself in relation to it, and you know you need to create your own meaning in Nietzschean terms. Yeah, it's a shame that Pernell Roberts didn't really do that many movies other than this. Like, it really shows you the low budget nature of them, where these actors just didn't, there weren't that many movies. They were just here for a couple and then bounced. He's quite good. He's quite believable. It would have been nice to see him pop up in like a Peck and Paw movie later down the line, or I don't know, like any of these more revisionist westerns. They always seem to benefit from casting actors in roles that depend on their iconography from earlier movies. It's almost like an Easter egg for Western fans. When I think about that, I think about. I mean, I guess it's kind of a Western as much as it takes place in the quote unquote West. But the use of Ben Johnson in Last Picture Show by Peter Bogdanovich, it's really poignant. It really means a lot. He leans into that without ever being too explicit about it. Was Ben Johnson in Red River? I don't think he was. Perhaps. I don't know if he was. I know he's a Ford guy. I don't know if he was in a Hawks circle as well. Now, see, here's like a classic, like Dirty Harry bit. Is there a bullet in the gun, or is there not one? Do we tell? And uh, rarely do characters ever seem to fully take the risk on it. They always seem to doubt themselves at the last moment, and then later it's revealed, oh no, there actually wasn't any bullets or whatever, or you know that there were, of course, and that you just got psyched out of it. Um, I would like to see a movie where they're being tested with this, and they're like, well, fuck it, I'll try. You know, then you know it's like maybe there is a bullet in there, but uh, God, I guess we wouldn't have that much of a movie if Randolph Scott just got shot in the gut by a rifle. But sure is a tense scene anyway. Yeah, what's interesting is that Pernell Robbins' character actually, is aligned with Randolph Scott in this, even though, textually we know that they're at odds. So, like, again, there's these deeper layers within the movie that you're playing around with. Yeah, this shit's great. I could have swore. Yeah, I don't know if they made up this locale or if they just found this place. It seems kind of odd. There's just literally like a fucking a goddamn like a ruined, I don't know, just a house in the middle of the desert. It doesn't seem like a place where you'd want to build anything. If I could build my home, I would want to build it near a river or something. Just anywhere that's not the fucking uh, just the desert. Not to shame anyone who does live in the desert, or but like with this, right? I don't know. It does feel maybe like they just constructed that set. Although, given how low budget these movies are, maybe not. Maybe that is a real place. Maybe you can still find it today. Yeah, I've never been out west. Although I would like to just find out. Again, like where do they shoot these movies? I would love to visit there and take pictures and uh, do cringy tourist stuff, except for Hollywood movies. That's how pathetic I am. But it is a dream of a sort. Yeah, I feel like in a John Sturges movie, we would get like a panning shot following them on their horses. We don't really get that here. We more just get them walking from one end to the other. Yeah, I love this. I never would have enjoyed being a free man if I had done you that way. It's just like the chivalry of the cowboy. Like it's not about what you're doing or what you can take advantage of, but it's about can you live with your actions. Yeah, see, this dialogue is sometimes mannered though. Like, you know, man should have something of his own to be proud of. They say that. Like that. It's almost like a David Mamet fucking line. There's just a blankness to the expression. I think Randall Scott is really good at selling those. Yeah, Randall Scott in a David Mamet movie. He probably died before Mamet started his career, but fuck, could have been cool. Yeah, I have a troubled relationship with mannered writing. Sometimes I'm into it. I guess I'm into it in these tough guy movies. I like that stuff, but that's just because I'm a perpetual adolescent and I just love tough people doing tough things. Yeah, I don't know. Um, in some other movies, I get the feeling it's a little bit try-hardy. For me, I kind of, if there's something that brisk, uh, I like it to be oriented around, I don't know, like a tough subject matter. It feels like it goes better with it. And we got Lee Van Cleef, the great. Hey, people talk about his image, but he's also got one of the great cinematic voices. He's just got this really, I don't know, his voice is like cigarette paper. I would love to use this in a movie once. I did him a hurt once. I did him a hurt once. We don't really understand what that hurt was, as far as I remember in this movie. It's never really explained. Yeah, the way Lee Van Cleef is like licking his lips and stuff. See, these movies, the antagonists aren't necessarily villains. There's something compelling about them. They're given an inner life, a three dimensionality that most Western bad guys don't get. Right? Like Liberty Valance isn't really a human being. He's more like a caricature. He's a force of evil in the John Ford movie. Whereas Bud Boddicker is, and Burt Kennedy as well, right? He's much more interested in the idea that someone can do bad things but still possess a complexity that can be understood and respected, and that even if the hero's got to kill the bad guy, he doesn't necessarily have to do it without an interpersonal struggle or a sense of regret. I mean, now I think we're kind of used to that, right? The age of every writer feels like a villain has to have some grandiose point. Here, there's not a lot of that really. There's not a lot of grandstanding about, well, this is why I'm right, kind of thing. Where like the villain is almost the protagonist and that they're trying to accomplish something. Here, it's more like everyone's just a human being, and you're not necessarily depriving someone of who they are just because of what they do, which is quite like an anti-Aristotelian way of telling westerns, I guess, but really compelling. All right, so now we enter this clearing with these woods, and of course the tree, which will become an iconic image later. Yeah, so we get this shot, which is then repeated, just like the beginning shot was repeated. Yeah, the stuff. There's a Delmer Daves movie called The Hanging Tree that I've yet to see. Um, it's probably not accompanied by this literal hanging tree. I don't know where the fuck Bud Bedecker found this. I wonder if this tree is still there. They might have chopped it down because it does look pretty fucking old and gnarly. Looks like it was struck by lightning. It doesn't really make any sense because it's the only tree in this huge clearing. But then again, that does happen, I suppose. Yeah, see, we have almost like this dichotomy between day and night, right? The day scenes, we're having journeys, we're making decisions. But when the night comes, and you have these day for night shots of people talking, there's it's almost like the unconscious of the movie comes out, and we have this examination of, should we do this? Should we do that? The characters seem more edgy and aggressive, more introspective. It's the kind of schematic separation of a movie uh, that I think, like on a first watch, you wouldn't really notice, but as you go along, you begin to admire the craft of what's being done. Yeah, I will admit, uh, yes, with these day for night scenes, there's so much detail that's lost that's a little bit difficult to understand, like which character is which, if you aren't just going by voices. Um, there's like as clear as the day photography is, you're not really getting that much here. I mean, I don't think it's the Blu-ray or anything that I have. I think the Blu-ray is quite handsomely mounted. Uh, in a lot of ways, it looks great. It's just that the way the movie's shot, this is where like the low budget really shows, is you just don't have that much to work with. Like a couple of lights would have been nice, maybe on the actors' faces. But then again, I just shit talked that. Yeah, it's hard. Like there are advantages and disadvantages, and uh, what was it? There's a movie I saw called The Outwaters, where it was just so fucking dark you just couldn't see a damn thing, and it just was immensely frustrating because so many of the frames of the movie just felt like, okay, there's just nothing here. Um, which is the whole point. It's restrained minimalism, right? But sometimes it can feel a little bit strained, which is unfortunate, but it happens. It also reminds me of Shakespeare plays, where you do have these different groupings of characters who then, you know, they separate and converge according to the dictums of the story, and uh, you almost like separate into like here's the scene of the chorus, and then here's the scene of the main action. Um, Obviously, much more on like a smaller scale than Shakespeare, but that element of drama is still present. I feel. Yeah, what I think is cool about this movie too is that there's no real question of the prisoner getting away. Someone's gonna get his ass, right? He's just a bastard. Someone's getting him, but it's a question of who, right? Uh, is his gang gonna get him? Is his fucking are like is my house Scott gonna get him? Is I don't know the fucking he's gonna get killed by the natives, right? Like you just have that. Although, yeah, the natives do disappear from the movie. I guess after that big attack. Oh my god, yeah, a scene like this is somewhat risible. I feel this is. I promise when I say this, this is not like an expression of like some cryptic misogyny or whatever. But I think I think you guys will know what I mean when I say that there's often in a lot of Hollywood movies there is like a presence of a female character who only exists to make it so the actions taking place in the movie aren't too coded with like a homosexual tension. I think these Bud Bedecker movies would have that homoerotic text to them, but as far as I remember, like they all basically have a female character to redirect that energy to, where it's like, oh, hubba hubba, lady, kind of shit. Um, and it's not just westerns, right? But I think the westerns particularly an interesting idea of it because, like here, you know, you did have Pernell Roberts being like, oh, this is no place for for you to be a woman alone without a man type shit. So it's like there is an acknowledgement in the text that like perhaps the story like doesn't necessarily have a place for a female character, at least from the writer's perspective, but nevertheless she remains. Um, and so yeah, I don't know, like it's like you don't want the movie to just like unilaterally not have a female character, and Lord knows there's just you know there's movies with no women in them at all, which is sometimes unfortunate. But then again, if a movie's gonna be fucking kind of just a bunch of dudes hanging out, you kind of want that, right? You don't want the version that doesn't exist. I think this is like the key Howard Hawks thing, right? Like Howard Hawks movies would be so gay if if they did not have, the Gene Arthur character or the Rosalind Russell character. And weirdly enough, I think that's key to Hawks is that uh, he always has like these exceptional women who act like men in his movies, that they act in a masculine way. And there's this idea of like gender being like a state of mind, a performance, instead of just this essential quality. Whereas with John Ford, you do feel like he does believe in this like archaic traditionalist idea, that's expressed in stuff like The Quiet Man of these like rigid gender boundaries. So yeah, it is explained what Frank did. Yeah, I did him a wrong by hanging his wife. It's so fascinating because like when you see the character later, he doesn't exactly seem like this cold-blooded maniac. I don't know. There's an interesting discrepancy between the story that Randolph Scott tells and the way Lee Van Cleef acts later, which is like an interesting. Um, what would you call it? It's like an ellipsis in the movie. All right, now we're coming to the final showdown, which is, I think, pretty spectacular. Very understated too. I love this like saying this shit flat out. When are we gonna kill Brigade? Like just, it's so funny when you have like all these games of we're understated, this and that. Okay, let's intrigue, but then characters just say what they feel. Like, when are we doing this? When are we dropping? See, I love this too. Can't kill a man like Brigade from behind. I love these movies where the characters have some essential quality to them that they're like, this is not how I'll act. I will not behave like this. I will not behave like a doggish cur and shoot someone in the back. It's dishonorable. And so here with the Roberts character, we do get the idea that he is interested in redemption in an alternate form of life, and the movie doesn't show that, but we're kind of left to see like, well, he's going to try, right? Which is, I think, pretty cool. You don't really see that optimism for a character who is uh, somewhat opposed to a hero in a Hollywood movie. He has his own valid perspective, his own life, his own history. Now, this is one of these repeated lines in these renowned westerns. There's some things a man just can't ride around. I love that. I'll put that on my fucking tombstone if I can ever afford a tombstone. I don't know how much they cost. Never looked into it really. Never had the occasion to, believe it or not. I don't know what, like a tombstone. I mean, it's like a piece of granite, right? You get it from like a rock quarry or something. We just chisel some shit into there. Are there professional chiselers? Who are these people? I guess there are. There must be. Now we have a music sting here, but overall the compositions of music in these movies are quite restrained. You don't really get a lot of fugues or whatever. This isn't laced from beginning to end like a John Williams movie with music. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you like movies that have like a ton of musical score in them, or ones that selectively use it? Nowadays, we don't really have that many great iconic scores, right? Mostly we have needle drops, which is unfortunate. A concession to the commercialized capitalist hellscape. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I There's sometimes in old Hollywood movies where I wish that there was less score because I think they overplay a lot of stuff just because like they're like we want the audience to get the point. Here's the rousing scene, so we're playing the rousing music, which I think we would be totally fine if they didn't. We'd be like, okay, it's interesting, looks great. But then again, I love composers like Basil Polidorus who were just so rousing, so huge, very Wagnerian. So there is something to be said for a lack of subtlety. Yeah, that match cut with him holding the rope and then it being on the tree is just great, simple, effective. It's always interesting to me where you have like a whole generation of actors who all essentially learn to ride horses, to dance, to do all these things in the studio system. Now you don't really get that. Now it's like, oh, I do all my own stunts, right? But it's not like a systemic thing. Whereas back then, if you had a John Wayne, say what you will, the guy could fucking ride a real horse. He was well practiced in it. Whereas now it feels like so much more specialized depending on the project. Yeah, we have this geographical cutting where we see where they're looking at him from behind the trees with the Winchesters. Um, it's pretty, again, just simple and effective. You understand where everyone is in the scene. I almost forgot a man can do that. See, there's like a desperation in Lee Van Cleef's voice. Obviously, he's a bad guy, but th- there's something like almost pathetic in him. It's hard to hate him necessarily. I think he brings a lot to the character. Yeah, there's an inevitability. It's like Randolph Scott is going to get his man no matter what. Now the montage here is so good, where you just have every single element being dispatched, people being shot, the tension of the man hanging, and he gets shot down. So yeah, I like this though. When you have the standoff, but he's so far in the distance, there is like a tension there where we're using like the figure's alienation from the center of the camera. We don't really know his intentions, right? Like we're so far away that's hard to read him. So the tension thus steps to the fore, and we're dealing with these figures in relation to each other, but not psychologically, right? It just becomes this almost like this arena of morality that is played out, and then he comes closer and closer to the camera, and we're brought into an equal relation between the two people. And then the tension is diffused, and you're just like, yeah, he's just gonna let him go. Here, have the prisoner. Yeah, I like this, like the good natured, like the raucous laughter. It reminds me of the end of Red River, where you got this huge epic showdown, this long ass fist fight, and then the characters just kind of laugh it off, and they're like, "Yeah, what a bunch of bullshit." Yeah, you said you wanted to start over. I hope so. Yeah, Red Scott's character is almost like a man with no name, wanderer, dispenser of justice. There's something. He's not at rest. He doesn't have a home. He's always out there looking for something. He's a searcher. I just love how he says that. Figures. I mean, that's all you need to say, right? You're just dealing with the inexplicability. This almost seems like a morality play, right? Um, but yeah, this final shot of him burning the tree. I don't know. Is he dealing with his past? Is he paying tribute to his wife? What exactly is going on with him? We're not brought into his subjectivity, so we're just dealt with the bare image of the tree, and that's that really. I think that's cinema. How do you feel about it? Well, it's up to you. And I think that's great. You can draw whatever you need, and that's Ride Lonesome. Thank you guys for listening to this commentary, and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you around. I'm still looking for a reason to write this country, but I haven't found one yet. Yeah, sad.